He was a banker with the ANZ banking group for 25 years before becoming CEO of Tata Consultancy Services, or TCS, a global tech giant that's valued at over $100 billion. He's currently executive chairman of Apex Avalon Consulting, a joint venture between Apex partners as well as Avalon Consulting. Avalon Consulting is India's largest strategy consulting company. Now, he became a Singapore citizen in 2010 and serves on several public sector boards, including, mind you, as chairman of the board of the Institute of Mental Health, IMH, in Singapore. Girija Pande, welcome to Inconvenient Questions.
Thank you, Visha. Nice to be here.
It's wonderful to have you on board here. Let me just cut to the chase and ask you the first question. You're an engineer by training, a banker for 25 years, and then CEO of a global consulting practice. Now, how does all this connect with you being appointed as chairman of Singapore's Institute of Mental Health?
Well, I've done many things. As you know, I used to be an engineer, then I became a banker, then I became a software person and technology person in IT, and then in consulting, management consulting. And then I've been on boards of many companies, both in Singapore and elsewhere. And I joined the board of National Healthcare Group, which is the main, one of the
leading groups
in Singapore, which handles public health. And one of the things that I realized was the Institute of Mental Health, where I think it's a very well-known institute in Singapore, has been around for a long time. And I was on the board of the Institute of Mental Health for the last 2 years. And then they asked me to take on the responsibility of chairman of the Institute of Mental Health. And as you know, we are passing through a very difficult time in Singapore, especially in
COVID,
mental health.
Especially exacerbated by COVID, right?
Exactly. So I call it a hidden pandemic. And many people, because of the stigma attached to mental health, we don't talk much about it. So yes, I am looking forward to being able to contribute to this, to the Institute, and what we can do for the society at large here.
What would you consider are some of the major issues that you would like to focus on in the area of mental health? You would like IMH and other institutions to focus on in terms of mental health?
So I think, as you probably also know, I was on the board of National Council of Social Service for over 6 years. And I think in National Council of Social Service, we look at social service from the other side, because we have a lot of social service agency which handle mental health in the community. So mental health, we divide between mental illness and mental wellness. And there are two separate aspects. So mental health illness is relating to acute care and issues around illnesses, and wellness, which is a wider issue for the society at large, tends to be what the social services organization or medical organizations handle.
Yeah.
I think that's the...
It's the flip side of the same coin, actually.
That's right.
But would you say that we have quite a bit of work to do in this space? Because actually, the realization of the importance of mental health has been actually quite recent, in my view. The Singapore Mental Health Study of 2016, actually said that 1 in 7 Singaporeans actually have experienced some form of mental health, mental disorder in their lifetime. And the number has been growing. Now, what do you think accounts for this? What are some of the reasons?
I think I suspect that if we took a survey again, it might be worse than the 2016 numbers.
I'm sure.
But COVID has obviously accelerated the problem. There are many issues why mental health has become such a big issue. And remember, this is not only in Singapore. Mental health is a worldwide issue and a worldwide pandemic. Because it is hidden, because of the stigma, people don't know the actual gravity of the problem. So
but is it true, Girija, is it true that some studies have suggested that more developed and affluent countries seem to have a higher proportion of mental health issues? Is it true?
I don't think studies have yet proven that, because for the simple reason, as we haven't done much and people don't talk about it much, even in developing societies, we don't know the extent there is. It's such a wide range of the disease burden of mental health
Yeah.
is very wide ranging. On one side, you have anxiety and depression. On the other side, you have bipolar, schizophrenia, psychosis, and others. So, that the whole spectrum, autism, then you land up with, as right from childhood to aging people, dementia and Alzheimer's. Mental health is a very wide spectrum. So different countries have different problems within the mental health spectrum.
Spectrum, yeah. And would you say that the other side that we need to tackle, I don't know whether IMH does that or I don't know which organization does it, greater awareness of what mental health is and avoiding stigmatizing people with mental health conditions. I mean, for example, the 2017 attitude study actually came up with this finding that 6 in 10 people who were surveyed believe that mental health conditions are caused by a lack of self-discipline and willpower. And that's quite bizarre. 6 in 10.
This is the problem with this disease. It is so underappreciated. It is so under researched that people have these kind of views. But I think many people are seeing this in their families, in their friend circles. So I think they are experiencing it now. In some cases, it is obvious. In some cases, depression and anxiety suddenly sometimes doesn't show up so easily.
Yeah.
So some of these are not easy but the disease burden is very high. And you probably know that because it has been so high that the government has actually set up recently an interministerial committee, which is looking at this whole area of mental wellness in the community.
That's right. But does that also include
forward to their deliberations?
Does mental wellness here also include medical conditions?
Yes, you talked about stigma. In NCSS, we actually ran a campaign, which you may have seen, which is called Beyond the Label.
Yes.
And we ran a campaign precisely for this, not only for mental health, but also for other issues which are hidden.
Yes.
Beyond the Label was our first effort to actually bring it out in the open, saying people with mental health conditions don't necessarily have problems in working in the offices or otherwise. Sometimes you find employers are not keen, the co-workers are unhappy or uncertain as to what to expect from people. So there are these issues can be resolved. There are medicines, there are processes, there are wellness issues which we can tackle these.
Yeah.
But it has to be coming out in the open. It has to be scientifically treated. There are treatable diseases. They are not untreatable.
And some people even think it's contagious.
That's part of I
yeah.
suppose the folklore around this is this. There is a lot of folklore.
Absolutely, plenty of folklore, and I mean, you came from India, where there's a lot of folklore. The other thing is, several MPs have brought up this issue, and I'm very happy that they're helping to create greater awareness. In fact, an awakening of sorts. For example, Anthea Ong, former NMP, nominated member of Parliament, in 2020, she talked about why is it not sufficiently affordable? Why is mental healthcare services, why aren't they affordable? Why aren't they sufficiently accessible? I mean, she talked about the median waiting time. And I think she said that for subsidized consultation in public hospitals like IMH, 27 days to see a psychiatrist and 28 days to see a psychologist. That's a long time, don't you think so? I mean, what are we doing about this?
So certainly the waiting time is an issue. I think we have to use two things. One, we have to use technology, and we have to really skill up. We are short. There is a shortage of good counselors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. There's a shortage, and I think there is a role IMH has in that as well.
What would you say is the role that IMH can play?
The role is for skilling up. I mean, the core of the psychiatrists and psychologists and physiotherapists and psychological therapists is in the IMH at the moment. So we need to bring this whole ecosystem, build it up so that we get more people, so that we can reduce waiting time. So that is one. The second is we need to use technology. And I think we will need to use telehealth, as we call it in a wider term, much more, so that people find it accessible to talk to doctors through what we are doing now on Zoom calls and videos. The other thing that I always say is there are a lot of startups. I must say I am impressed with very many startups which are looking at this issue of wellness. There are apps which you can see. The most common one, if you know, is the Calm app, which people use. But there are others for Singapore. We need to devise something for Singapore. And I'm glad to say that I have seen some where people are looking at the whole issue of
not only apps, Girija, also wearable technologies, right?
Yes.
It's amazing.
Even using AI. We are using AI to be able to predict some of the issues. And in fact, we have signed one up in IMH with one of the startups. Yeah. So I think there is a lot of people who are using technology. There is a need to skill up, and we certainly need to reduce waiting times and accessibility to people. Now, as regards costs, and you talked about the costs, I think we will need to get the insurance companies on board on some of these diseases and conditions which can be reimbursed. So we need to talk about that as well. So I think there is a lot of issues on the table. I'm glad there is an interministerial committee looking at it, and I'm looking forward to their deliberations and what we can do. I think they are aware of all these issues that we are just talking about. It has been clearly highlighted by MPs and others in the community. So I think it will be a good start for getting a handle on this issue.
Yeah. You know, there have been a lot of discussions over the years in Singapore as to whether people who run hospitals should be doctors, you know, as in administratively, and people who hold the position as board members and chairpersons and so on. Should they be, is it better for them to be doctors or not doctors? My own view, sometimes it's good to have people who can ask the dumb question, right? People who are not doctors who will say, what do you mean by that? Can you explain that to me?
Well, I suppose I asked some of the dumb questions.
No, but isn't that important? Would you say that that's actually important?
I think it's, Singapore understands that. In our health group, in National Health Group, most people on the board are people who are from different walks of life. They have been from the corporate world, from the scientific world, from parts of the world, the legal professions. Yeah. I think they all can add to this issue. The doctors already run it. And I think it's the management of the hospital and the disease burden, which sometimes people from outside can look at it. You need statisticians when we look at, you know, the whole issue of population.
Especially when you're looking at epidemiology.
We look at
things like that.
Health, when we look at the disease burden. So I think people are realizing that the health sector needs inputs from the outside as well. That is not to say that our own doctors and clinicians are not capable. I think they are doing a wonderful job, but I think we need to give them some outside view to help, especially in the area of technology.
Technology. I mean, this struck me when you were talking about technology, because your background is technology. I mean, when you were doing, you know, Tata Consulting, you've become a lot more familiar with that. Secondly, you've got network. You've got a very broad network. You know, when you're chairman of Tata Consulting for Asia Pacific, you know, you had so many different markets, you know. So, you know, sometimes you need to be able to pick up the phone and call some people and get some answers.
True.
Has that helped you?
Yes. In fact, the first question I asked when I was at IMH was, you know, where do we rank? After all, this is not only in Singapore. Where do we rank globally? Where do we rank? Are we doing all the right things? Are we missing some technologies? Are we missing some treatment options? So I think we need to look outside as well. There's a very important issue which I have been talking about is research. Where are we on research? Because we also need to have research papers published. We need
so that we can make data-based decisions.
That's right. So there's a whole swing of things which is beyond the day-to-day issues with hospitals manage.
Right. Now, you became a citizen of this country, Singapore, in 2010. I see you smile. And I remember having conversations with you. You were delighted when you became a citizen. And why was it important for you to be a citizen of this country?
So I've lived in this country for over 20 years
20
now.
years.
And I actually have lived in many countries, as you know. And when I grew and we planted roots here, I realized that some of the things that I value is what Singapore society has. It's a real mix of integrity, of looking after people, of running an efficient organization. And I think I quite liked a society which was, multicultural. And I settled in quite well. Then I saw how the government runs many of the functions, and it was a pleasure, and I decided to become a citizen, having lived in many societies. And I think when you live in another society, you need to appreciate it, become a model immigrant, so that you feel for the country. And I always ask my friends, how many of you read the local papers? The not just the headlines of Business Times or Singapore ST, but that's where you really get the feel of the challenges. And when I was at NCSS, I think that was an amazing opening in my eyes to the
Yes, yes.
social issues. 450 agencies, VW.
But for that, Girija, it's important to be plugged in. You know, one of the criticisms, if I may be blunt, leveled against new citizens is that, especially if you're from India or China and so on, you tend to stick to yourselves. You're not sort of integrating enough. Do you think that's a fair observation?
Well, it is certainly. I think many people I speak to, I raise this issue all the time that, to be a model immigrant, you have to be part of society completely, which means integrating, of course. And if you remember in Cinda, I started the Indian business roundtables because so many senior Indians have arrived and taken citizenships or PRs, and I wanted them to be integrated.
And to have an avenue.
They understand the challenges of Singapore. People who come from outside only see the veneer of Singapore. Oh, it's sufficient. It's got a great airport. It's got low taxes. But when I was in NCSS, I was seeing the bottom end of Singapore when we were looking at people in various dire straits in different situations.
Yeah.
And that is, as we said, we used to always look at the last 20%, the last two deciles.
That's right.
And I say to people, unless you look at the last two deciles, you will never know the country.
Yeah. Now, do you think that when you become a citizen of a country like Singapore, you'll always be seen as an outsider? Some of my friends who are naturalized citizens say, somehow I feel that I will never be accepted by the homegrown citizens of Singapore. Do you sense that?
I have a different opinion.
Yeah.
Number one, if you integrate people, if you work for the community, I found, like I have been in many entities where I'm the only immigrant, let's put it that way, right?
Or a relatively new citizen.
I have never been treated like that because they see me involved. Some people have told me, we only do national service for 2 years. You've done it for 20 years. Right? So if you are involved with the community, Singapore is very open to you. I have never felt that way. I have sometimes been the only person in the board or in the committee, and people have accepted it because they know that we are involved with the community issues.
Yeah.
Singapore is that way very accommodating.
Yeah, and sometimes we feel that the new citizens, the naturalized citizens, you appear to be beholden to the government, to the country, that you are almost in your face in the way you're a cheerleader of the country. That's also something that's been said. How would you respond to that?
I think that is not correct. I mean, we give our views in many forums, and we give it like a citizen, what is right, what is not. And I have never lacked that. I may not give it in public, but I certainly do it in private. I have talked on many issues with people. And I feel quite comfortable doing that. Why would I don't see any challenge in being able to talk about issues which you think need to be looked at.
Yeah. Now, here's the other question, right? You were born and bred, raised, educated in India for a lot of your life. And surely there's a strong sense of patriotism. And then at some point, you switch and become a citizen of another country. How does that affect one emotionally? I'm asking because I'm not sure how what kind of emotions play up. You know, when you cross over to another country and become a citizen of that country, it's like moving from your mother to your wife after you get married. you know, could you try and share with us the kind of emotions that you go through when you switch citizenship?
See, I must say that maybe some people find it difficult, but I have lived in 4 societies. I have lived in Korea. I have lived in Hong Kong. I lived meeting with the family. I have lived in Bahrain. I have, of course, lived in India. So I have lived in the whole of Asia, from the Far East to the Middle East. And I have worked with those societies in whichever capacity I was. So I have an appreciation of, when you work in a community, how you leave your Indianness away and you absorb that culture. Then only you appreciate that culture. You cannot appreciate the culture by holding on to your own culture.
Sure. Do you feel that you can actually love both countries?
Yes, yes.
Deeply, right?
There is absolutely no issues at all.
Yeah.
I have my, obviously, I live here. I've lived here for so many years. I know people. I have more people I know now in Singapore than probably
And then
I know
probably in
anywhere
India.
else. And I have dear friends in all communities in Singapore. So I never have thought about it at all in this way.
Yeah. So here's a trick. Here's a naughty question, Girija. Uh, what if there's an international hockey match between India and Singapore? Who would decide?
That's a question normally in India we ask on cricket.
Cricket. So I say,
hockey gets, that's a religion there, right?
yeah, but because Singapore hardly plays cricket, so it's
So
got to be hockey. Yeah. So how
yes.
would you be torn?
Listen, I will certainly track both teams. I will certainly track both teams. It would be on my list who's doing what in the league.
But if they're competing against each other.
Yeah, if they are competing against each other, then I will have to sit in the center and figure out who will win.
That's a very clever answer. You should be a diplomat. Okay, very quickly, we have to wind up soon. Maybe there's something to be said about dual citizenships. I feel that the world should be moving in that direction, but that's something for us to think about. My final question to you: if there's one thing you'd like to see changed in Singapore, what would that be, as a citizen of this country?
I think Singapore has really moved, in phases. It keeps changing as it goes along, and that is the story of success of Singapore. That is ability to adapt. And I think the exceptional nature of Singapore society. What we now need is, Singapore needs to get far more entrepreneurial. People need to get far more entrepreneurial. If you talk to a lot of people outside, they talk about, the government does everything, so the people are sort of, there's a nanny state concept which people outside talk about. And I think we need to have far more entrepreneurs. We need to create innovation, because Singapore's survival.
But what is holding us back?
I think there is, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, Silicon Valley didn't happen overnight, right? It takes a long while. It takes a long cultural change. Culture to fail. We need to first create a culture that if it's a failure is a badge of honor. I work with a lot of startups, deep tech startups. And that's the first thing I tell them. Unless you have a culture to fail, it's not a badge of honor. You will never be able to succeed as an entrepreneur. And I think those are the kind of cultural traits we have to bring in. But if everyone wants to be a doctor, lawyer, or banker, then I think we cannot get people into the entrepreneurial mode.
Yeah,
I think that's what we need.
There probably needs to be a shift in the way we value certain jobs.
That's right.
Right?
I think.
And maybe we need to
our entrepreneurs. We need to honor our entrepreneurs even when they fail.
Yeah.
We need to honor them. Then only innovation and new things up. It's not that we can't do it. I think the culture has to change. We have the technology, we have the institutions, we have the universities, we have research funding, we have a lot of funding. It's just that attitudes and things will have to change of both society and entrepreneurs. And that's what we need.
Right. Well, on that note, thank you very much for joining us at Inconvenient
It was
Questions.
a pleasure, Vishwa, as always.
Girija, thank you.
Thank you.